Turns out, now we're learning that the Robb Elementary School teacher who was accused of allegedly propping an exterior door open, which then allegedly let the mass shooter into the classroom, didn't actually do so at all. It's yet another part of the shooting, another part of the story that is changing after officials in the area told us something completely different. So in other words, more of the critical details of the Uvalde, Texas school shooting are changing, which continues to raise questions about what the intent has been in regard to the police officials in the area. So let me explain. Investigators initially said the teacher had propped the door open with a rock and did not remove it before Salvador Ramos, 18, entered the school. But investigators have now determined that the teacher removed the rock and closed the door when she realized there was a shooter on campus, but that it did not lock. And that's according to Travis Considine, who is a chief communications officer for the Texas Department of Public Safety. So the teacher did initially prop the door open, but then she ran back inside to get her phone and call 911 when Ramos had crashed his truck. So apparently there were some workers at a funeral home nearby, and they were yelling to the teacher to let her know that this guy was a threat, okay? She came back out while she came back out while on her phone. She heard someone yell, "He has a gun." She saw him jump the fence and that he had a gun. So she ran back inside, removing the rock when she did. We did verify she closed the door. The door did not lock. We know that much, and now investigators are looking into why it did not lock. So the door is supposed to automatically lock according to what the officials are saying now. Who knows whether or not that part of the story is gonna change yet again. But we do know that based on what they have confirmed through their preliminary investigation, the teacher is not at fault here. The teacher did not leave the door propped open, which leads me to ask, why was there this effort to immediately jump to a conclusion about the teacher, which seemed to put blame on the educator in regard to the terrible, tragic events that happened that day? You know, the story keeps changing, that's bad enough, but we need to ask why the story keeps changing. Why is it that the officials were so quick to point fingers at this teacher, especially when we're talking about police officials who decided to stand outside for over an hour and do absolutely nothing as the 18-year-old gunman was slaughtering students in that 4th grade classroom. Now, the employees at the nearby funeral home, as I mentioned, told her that Ramos had a gun, and that's according to her lawyer. The clarification about the door represents just one, and there are many, just one of the shifts in authorities' explanation of the massacre's timeline. They face mounting questions over why 80 minutes elapse from when the time officers were first called to the moment a tactical team entered the locked classroom and killed, well, by the way, by the time the gunman was in the room, the door had been locked. But yeah, entered the locked classrooms and killed the gunman. Now, meanwhile, the Uvalde School District Police Chief, who was the incident commander during the shooting, was actually sworn in as a member of the city council just yesterday. Okay, so this pretty terrible person, at least incredibly ineffective and has bad judgment in terms of his job, he got elected to the city council. He ended up getting sworn in yesterday. Pedro Pete Arredondo has faced criticism for the decision to have officers posted in the hallway outside the classrooms where the shooting took place, waiting for more than an hour to intervene before a Border Patrol tactical team entered the room and killed the gunman. Now, we do have some more details on the criticism that the police are receiving as a result of their terrible way of handling this mass shooter. And we do have some audio of the 911 dispatcher communicating to the cops what the students had been communicating to her, the students who were in the classroom calling 911 begging for help. So let's take a quick look at that video.
A Officials say at least 2 children called 911 multiple times, begging police to come while the gunman was still inside their classroom. The Texas Department of Public Safety director says one child told a 911 operator 8 or 9 students were still alive. Audio from an unconfirmed source revealing at some point law enforcement was aware kids were inside the classroom.
At what point do people not use some common sense here? Listen to 911 calls that are coming in, understand that kids are still alive inside, and know that they have to go in there, do their jobs under the active shooter protocol.
Yeah, I mean, and remember, one of the arguments that would provide cover for the cops was the idea that, oh, maybe the cops thought that all the students had already been gunned down, or that the shooter had finished doing this terrible, unspeakable act of violence. No, the police, based on what we just heard with the 911 dispatcher, knew that there were still students inside who were alive, people that they should have cared about saving. But they still waited an insane amount of time, over an hour, to do a damn thing about it. Again, these are the alleged good guys with a gun who were so cowardly that they refused to do anything for over an hour, as literal 4th graders were being gunned down. And then the stories keep changing. And so there is a state investigation into this police department. There's also a DOJ investigation, but there's also a new update to the Uvalde Police Department and its unwillingness to cooperate. So let's go to the next video. It describes that in more detail.
State officials say Uvalde School's police chief, Pete Arredondo, is no longer cooperating with its investigators after his initial interview. Law enforcement sources say Uvalde police and Uvalde School's police are also not complying, but the state later released a statement saying both agencies have been cooperating. Several law enforcement sources tell ABC News Arredondo's refusal comes after the Texas DPS director called Uvalde's police delayed response the wrong decision. Arredondo reportedly ordered tactical teams to not go into a classroom, wrongly believing there was a barricaded subject, not an active shooter. And ABC News has learned that Uvalde School's police were trained in March to confront active shooters. The response that day last week now under state and federal investigation.
So state and federal investigation, we'll see what that investigation turns up. But just for further clarification in regard to the Uvalde Police Department and its cooperation with these investigations. According to the Texas Department of Public Safety, a spokesperson for them said this: the Uvalde Police Department and Uvalde CISD police have been cooperating with investigators. The chief of the Uvalde CISD police provided an initial interview, this is Arredondo, but was not or has not responded to a request for a follow-up interview with the Texas Rangers that was made 2 days ago. So it appears that he at first started to cooperate with the investigation. He later decided not to cooperate with the investigation, probably because he advised the officers to handle or respond to the mass shooting in the worst possible way, which is not really responding at all until more than an hour had passed. So that's where we are. Who knows what else is likely to change, but you can understand the rage that people are feeling. Certainly the parents who were tased as they were begging the cops to do something, you can understand the rage that they're feeling. They want answers. They want to know why they received so much misinformation in regard to the press conference that the officials had given after the shooting, and people deserve answers. But at the end of the day, blaming a teacher for, even if she had accidentally left the door open, the teacher is not the one at fault. Everything else, all the scapegoats that gun advocates and the police department are currently trying to find, don't get distracted by the squirrels that they're throwing your way. At the end of the day, the biggest issue here is the ongoing massacres that we see in this country as a result of easy access to all sorts of weapons, all sorts of assault weapons that certainly an 18-year-old should not have access to. An 18-year-old who doesn't even have the legal right to drink alcohol somehow has the ability to buy these weapons that cause mass destruction in a 4th grade classroom. 19 students dead, 2 teachers dead, 21 people brutalized, murdered by this 18-year-old. And the idea that we need to focus on one teacher who allegedly, now it turns out it's not true, but was accused of propping a door open, nonsense. Okay, don't get distracted by their made up scapegoats. Focus on what the real issue is here. Lax regulations on guns and the corrupt, disgusting, craven politicians who provide cover for the gun lobby and the profit motives that the gun lobbies have.